Welcome back to another episode of the Packs What She Said podcast. I'm one of your co-hosts, Maggie Loney. Perry Goldstein is traveling this week in sunny California, so I am joined by my West Coast friend, Andrew Mertig, who is the only person that was crazy enough to agree, one, to come on the show this late at night, and two, to talk about that game, because nobody wants to talk about this game.
Yeah, always super happy to be here. I try not to be that negative, Maggie. You know me, but I feel like every single time I'm on the show, it's like me ranting about how terrible the Packers just played or a draft pick I don't like. And so we got to stop this. Something about having me on seems to be a curse.
I was going to say, unfortunately, maybe it's bad luck for me to invite you to come on the show ahead of time. Yeah. So we're going to have to
just
consider that moving forward.
Wait till we have something positive to talk about.
All right. So obviously the Packers' final game at Lambeau Field, we now know for the entire 2025 season, they had a chance to lay claim to the division if they could win out and the Bears could lose out, hosting the Ravens, who were out, lost 3 of their last 4, were on the struggle bus coming into Lambeau and just put up 41 points. And it was a really fluky, weird game, right? You have Tyler Huntley against Malik Willis. So right from the jump, we knew this one was going to be kind of weird. You have a Ravens team that has been giving the ball away like candy, fumbling left and right, all their stars, and all of a sudden they are all just protecting the football incredibly well, and the Packers are struggling with turnovers. So really weird game, and we'll get into it, but unfortunate to see such an incredible Malik Willis performance and the way that it did for this football team.
Yeah, I mean, we'll certainly talk all about Malik Willis and the positives that you can draw from that, at least temporarily until the offseason. But for me, this game is all about Jeff Hafley. And, you know, we've sung Hafley's praises. I think there's a lot of teams that have seriously considered him as a head coaching candidate. But if I look at a performance like this from the outside, like, I just don't know how you justify it. This is a team who has struggled all year, even with Lamar Jackson. Granted, Lamar was limited most of the year, but they have struggled to get the ball down the field, make any sort of big plays at all. And then you step in here, Tyler Huntley is the quarterback, and you know what the Ravens are going to do. They're coming off of a ton of controversy about not using Derrick Henry the right way last week. So you know they're going to run the ball over and over and over. And I said, I posted this right before the game started. My biggest fear is that John Harbaugh is suddenly going to remember that he has Derrick Henry on his team and give him 30 carries. And it ended up being 35, I think, at the end. But, like, you have to stop the run. And so, okay, your defensive line is super limited. That's fine. I understand it. But, like, at some point, you have to put 8 guys in the box. I don't care if you give up a touchdown on every single throw. Like, you cannot give up 1 billion yards to Derrick Henry and just let him own this game. It's unforgivable, in my opinion. And looking at the playoffs, right, it's a good thing the Packers aren't going to have to face any teams that are going to stay really committed to the run, like the Rams or 49ers or the Bears, right? Like, those teams are watching this tape and they are laughing. They're like, okay, cool, we'll run Kyron Williams or Christian McCaffrey or the Bears duo 40 times against you. We will just keep ramming it down your throats because you will not commit to stopping the run.
Yeah, and I mean, I think, you know, certainly the run defense has struggled. Hadn't been, right? It was one of the strengths of this defense, which is what made it even more surprising. You know, you talked about, like, if there was one kind of glimmer going into this one against a guy like Derrick Henry, is that historically they had been playing the run pretty well on defense this season. And then, of course, we know they lost Devontae Wyatt earlier in the year, and you're looking for replacements. And then you bring in Jordan Riley, who had been, like, kind of a bright spot on the defensive line, looked really good, and he goes out with an Achilles. So not to blame injuries on this, right? Because every team in the NFL is dealing with injuries, especially this late in the season. But it feels like these injuries are starting to compound. And every time the Packers see, like, a sliver of light that, you know, maybe there's going to be a little bit of health or guys are going to come back, you get Evan Williams back for this one. And none of it seems to make a difference. And they're dropping, you know, like Kamal Hadden, Nate Hobbs, both of your like depth pieces at corner go out. And I think just that element makes this even more confusing going into week 18, right? Because you're not wanting to play your starters. We saw what happened last season when the Packers played some starters in a quote unquote meaningless football game. But how many bodies do you have to make a roster that can actually go into Minneapolis and play at this point, considering how many pieces are injured? And I think the other point of that is now you're on a 3-game losing skid, right? I remember going on Last Call Lambeau with Monty and Aaron and Dusty before the Broncos game, and we were talking about whether or not the Packers are going to lose again this season. And then everything just completely derails. And now you're looking at going into the playoffs as the 7th seed, which you are locked into, probably going into Soldier Field. Granted, arguably should have beat the Bears twice, but you're going into Soldier Field or Philly, right? If Philly somehow sneaks into the second seed, if the Bears lose out and the Eagles win out. And you have to try to overcome potentially 3, if not 4 straight losses to get into a really talented football team's home field advantage. And that just, it seems like a lot to overcome for a Packers team that's going to squeak into the wild card at this point.
Yeah, and this will be the end of my Halfley rant, but for me, it's like the combination of we're not going to commit to stopping the run, and then we're also going to play soft. So when we finally get them to 3rd and 5, we're going to play like soft coverage, let them catch the ball, and then assume that Carrington Valentine or Keyshawn Nixon can tackle, which neither one can. Tonight, they were awful. Like both, I would give really, really terrible grades on initial watch. And it's like you can't combine those things against a team that you have to challenge Tyler Huntley and say, okay, if you can beat us, we'll shake your hand. That's what the Ravens did to Malik Willis, which almost backfired on them. But they were like, hey, all right, we're gonna play you pretty straight up, and good luck. And for the Packers, they were like, well, we're gonna play you like you're Lamar Jackson, and we're terrified of you beating us over the top. And Tyler Huntley doesn't have the skill set. So I don't know. I don't get it. To me, it was maybe the worst game plan I've seen in the Halfley era. And to see that game plan combined with a really weak performance and a little bit of like, didn't seem like the Packers had anything to play for in this one. It's frustrating as a fan.
Yeah, and I mean, like, I know there were some perspectives going into this one, right? That earlier in the week, I saw the take quite a bit that it felt like the North was just not going to happen, even though it was still very much within reach, right? Like the Bears did not have 2 gimmies to end the season. They're going to San Fran to play tomorrow on Sunday Night Football. And then you had the Lions. Dan Campbell, we saw him knock the Packers out of postseason contention in Aaron Rodgers last season. So certainly not a coach that's going to roll over and give anybody any easy layup victories. So had the Packers gone out and, pulled this one out, they're setting themselves up for a really down to the wire week 18 victory that decides the division. And instead, man, like just reading through these stats, right? 414 total yards for the Ravens, 107 passing yards, only 307 rushing yards, 5.6 yards per play, 30 first downs, 10 of 14 on 3rd down, which is abysmal, 74 total plays, 4 of 6 in the red zone. Not good. Time of possession, 40 minutes. Like,
just so wild.
Yeah, and I mean, you can't even say like, oh, the Packers had a backup quarterback in, because Malik Willis has played fantastic football, and I thought he did last week too, right? Like any Packer fan was trying to discredit the Bears' victory by saying, hey, they beat a backup. Malik Willis has proven time and time again that he should probably be a starter on another roster, and he's going to get paid this offseason accordingly. But the Ravens also played a backup, right? Like there was no way you could go into this one and say, well, if we only had X. So what is your concern level? Let's pivot. I don't know how deep we want to dive into the Ravens game, right? We saw it, we know what happened, but you've got week 18. You're going to Minneapolis. It's going to be hostile because it's the Vikings. And then you're going, like we said at the top of the show, either to Soldier Field or you're going to play in Philly. Like, where are you at in wildcard weekend? Is this still a Packers team that you think can compete? Or is this kind of just like extending the inevitable? Because I'm forever an optimist and I'm not having a great night.
Yeah. No, I think one of the issues, right, we always go back to 2010 and the run the Packers got on, and that team just got nuclear hot going into the playoffs and carried that all the way through the Super Bowl. I don't think that NFL history will tell you that you have to be incredibly hot going into the playoffs. I think that's a misconception a little bit. I do think that your team has to show that they can play against good teams. And that's not something that I'm super confident in, especially given the injuries that they have currently. That being said, the Packers were given basically no shot to win in Dallas in Love's first year as a starter, and obviously they smoked them. They had a really good chance against 49ers. I think this team can be competitive. They have a lot to figure out in defense. I don't think Soldier Field makes me a little nervous, both because that's a very high risk game, right? Like against the rival, you don't want to have to hear about that for the next 20 years. But in addition, I think this team would be better served to play indoors in the playoffs. I think just given their current makeup, I think the offensive line, just getting healthy, I don't want to play on Soldier Field, but also just the way that this team is playing, I think they have a lot of guys that are maybe a little bit faster on turf on defense than they have looked outdoors. So I don't mind going on the road. I don't mind going in hostile environments. But if this team is going to have any chance, it is going to be Jordan Love being Superman. We saw Justin Herbert almost do that with no offensive line against a incredible Texans defense today. I think that's the kind of performance we're going to need to see for the Packers to just be able to stay in games. And then to win it, they're going to need a little bit of luck. But yeah, I think the optimism of saying, yeah, this is a team that can win 4 straight games on the road, probably not super high. But I do think you take it 1 week at a time, and hey, you know what? Packers can win in Chicago. They proved it. Minus, just finishing the job.
Minus 2 minutes of regulation.
I think Philly's a more difficult matchup, but that's a team the Packers showed they could beat. So the NFC, nobody scares me, and that's why I would give the Packers a chance, not because I think they're an elite team, but because I think everybody's just sort of there's some really good teams and there's some good teams. And I think anybody can beat anybody in both the NFC and AFC. So, puncher's chance.
Yeah. I mean, I think that certainly it's really hard to find the identity of this Packers team, right? Is you have a defense that's playing really well and it's keeping the team in games, and then the offense can't get anything going. And then you have an offense that's scoring on anybody, going back and looking at the Broncos game, right? It felt like that offense had this Broncos defense, one of the best in the league, on the ropes. Yep. And then the injuries start to pile up and, things get off a rhythm. And then the defense ends up giving up 34 points. You have a Ravens game where the offense is looking hot with Malik Willis. Sean Ryan, I think, plays his worst game so far as a center. Certainly doesn't help things. You're without Zach Tom again, so the right side of the line is just kind of, can't get anything going with Josh Jacobs. Probably should not have played, right? Should have just been inactive for the week and given himself some rest, which seems to be kind of a theme these last couple of weeks with him. And then your defense gives up 41, right? So there's no, we're going into week 18 of the season and there's no complimentary football. And that has been a problem for a lot of the season, is that, you see really impressive performances from one facet of the game and then something drops off on the other side. And if it's not, offense or defense, it's penalties or self-inflicted mistakes, or you're backing yourself up. So you're getting into second and long, third and long situations. So the Packers are going to have to go into the postseason playing some really clean football, which they can do. We've seen them do it, right? And they beat the Bears. They almost beat the Bears a second time, if that is the matchup. They also, like you said, almost beat Philly, but they're going to have to play some pretty clean football to do it.
So something else you just jogged in my memory, and this is sort of going back in the script, but like the Packers special teams, we have been complaining about forever, right? And it's bad, but it has never looked as bad as it did tonight. And there was not a particular blunder. That's not what I'm talking about. Like, obviously in Chicago, that was more costly, but just like the Ravens are always the best special teams unit in the league by far, because John Harbaugh used to coach special teams. They make it a huge priority. Every kickoff is like a struggle to get to the 25. And I watch a lot of other games around the league now that I don't have to focus on the Packers exclusively. And my goodness, like every team, their returners get it out to the 30 and 35 all the time. So like how bad do they have to be like negative 5 to 10 yards on every other team in the league on kick returns? And then on punt returns, like I'm just keeping my fingers crossed the entire time that Romeo Doubs can successfully fair catch the ball. That's it. That's all I'm asking for. No yards on returns, because the Packers can't have those things. This special teams unit is awful. And I don't know that that's something that they can overcome in the playoffs. So going back to the pessimism, like you win playoff games typically in the margins, and the special teams can be a huge part of that. And the Packers are never going to win the special teams matchup. So they're going to have to overcome it even more so, probably on offense. And that puts so much pressure on Jordan.
Yeah. And I think, I'm not sure if it was just, a little bit of gamification there, sportsmanship to try to get the Ravens guessing as to who was going to play quarterback this week. But it seemed like Jordan Love was trending towards playing. So gamification. Geez, you can tell I work in higher ed. That's gamesmanship was what I was looking for. You can tell it's late at night, but yeah, I think he could probably play next week, right? I think he's going to clear concussion protocol by then, but I don't want him to. Unless there's something to be said about like knocking the rust off, trying to get some more rhythm in your offense, trying to put some pieces together. Like Zach Tom at this point, sit him until the wild card round 2, right? Like I don't want anybody to go back out there. I think Josh Jacobs needs to sit with his back and let that heal as much as he possibly can. Like poor Malik Willis. I don't even want him to play at this point. But yeah, it's frustrating, and I'm curious. Unfortunately, Perry and I have had to talk about this quite a bit this season. But Matt LaFleur, I think that you have been higher on him than a lot of what I've seen, holistically. Yeah. And we have 2 on the show, but 3 wild card appearances in the last 3 years. Does that bother you at all? Are you expecting, I know we talked at the beginning of the season that we thought the division was well in reach for the Packers, but we also knew the Lions were going to be good. We thought the Bears could be a wild card team, right? It happened to flip and the Bears ended up winning the division, but like we knew the NFC North was going to be like a black and blue, just slogfest, a juggernaut kind of division. Have you soured at all on the way that the season has unfolded, or is it a LaFleur thing? Is it bigger than him? Is it rest on his shoulders because he's a head coach?
For me, like I take a look at Matt LaFleur, and maybe I don't think he's a top 5 coach in the NFL anymore. I still think he's untouchable. I mean, look at his record, his career record. And you can say, oh, well, he had Aaron Rodgers for his first few years and blah, blah, blah. Like, I don't care. He has just won as an NFL coach. And like, yeah, you'd love to win the division. But did Matt LaFleur not field the onside kick correctly last week? Or did Matt LaFleur take a cheap shot on his own quarterback that got him knocked out for this week? Like, no. I mean, I don't know what you can blame him for. There are certainly he has weaknesses, right? Like he's not Andy Reid with the perfection of play calling and clock management, and maybe he's not the play caller Sean McVay is, but neither is anybody else. And if you're going to go out and try to replace Matt LaFleur, look around the league. Who are you going to hire? You going to hire Jeff Hafley after the performance he put on tonight? Like, who's going to be better than Matt LaFleur right now? And if you can tell me, okay, well, like Mike Vrabel is available again, like last year. Okay, like maybe that's an upgrade. Maybe, I don't know. Like LaFleur is a very, very good coach, and nothing will sour me on that until the Packers have a true disaster and miss the playoffs. Like, he didn't tear Tucker Kraft's ACL or Michael Parsons' ACL or any of those things. Like, he's coaching with what he has. Now, you can take a look at his clock management decisions, sometimes the plays he challenges, sometimes game management. Yeah, like, he needs to improve. He needs to get a new special teams coordinator. I can tell you that. But like, I don't know what else we can ask from an offensive mind who has also turned into, I think, a really good player development coach. And like, for the most part, built really good staffs outside special teams.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of the interesting piece of this. Perry and I talked about it a couple weeks ago, and we talked about, I said it made me sound like such a terrible person because I said I think one of Matt LaFleur's problems is his loyalty, and when you say that, you're
Yeah.
like, "Wow," but it's just, and it could be like the way the Packers front office operates, right? It doesn't necessarily have to be a Matt LaFleur thing, but the way the contracts are structured, it always feels like the Packers are really good at moving on from players a year too early, but they never have that same effect with coaches. The coaches, it always feels like they're lingering for a year or two too long, and then they kind of overstay their welcome and things sour. But again, is that like a Matt LaFleur thing? Is that the way that the front office operates and they prefer that contracts go a certain way? We know Matt LaFleur is due, right? Technically at the end of the season for a contract extension. Or I guess just another contract in general. So we'll see what that looks like. But yeah, certainly like Adam Stenavich, I'd be curious to see if the Packers would move on from him, especially if a name like Mike McDaniel were to become available, depending on what happens with the Dolphins. Special teams, I think, is another tricky one, obviously, that you have to consider looking at if Matt LaFleur is able to do those things, right? Because maybe he is considering that. Maybe he has wanted to make moves and he's got people in his ear saying, well, we can't because of X. And again, this is just random hypothesizing, but I do think that that is a factor, as we don't necessarily know what decisions he's making and what decisions are being kind of whispered into his ear.
Yeah, and like, part of this is on Goody too. Like, so just take kick returner, for example. Andy Herman, it was probably 2 months ago now, but did like a really phenomenal episode on Pack-A-Day about all of the different kick returners that were available on practice squads around the league, like guys that were really successful in the preseason. And the fact that they haven't brought in anybody and said, hey, we can give this guy a 3-week tryout, activating them game day from the practice squad and just see if they work. And then, hey, like, they're always rotating spots on the 53 with injuries. So like, they've done nothing. We're relying on Nate Hobbs was back for a kick return today before he got injured. And then like Bo Melton has proved he can't do anything on kick returns. And like, I don't know. They've tried everybody who's on the roster, but they haven't gone outside of the roster. And so again, this is an organizational problem. And I don't have all the answers. You just mentioned a lot of really good reasons why, like, I don't think we know all of the background behind it, but someone's got to change.
Yeah, it's funny that you say that because my brain immediately jumped to Kenny Nwangu, who's with the Vikings, and he's with the Jets, where they have like 800 running backs. I'm like, call them, right? And then you have like these big brain Goody moments, right, where he gets Malik Willis for a conditional 7th, and he trades for Micah Parsons, and you're like, oh my gosh, everything is just coming up Millhouse, everything is perfect. And then, and again, the coaching staff, like players, nobody can account for injuries, and some of these things are insurmountable. And I think that's probably going to unfortunately be the theme of this season, is that Tucker Kraft, like Elton Jenkins, even though he hadn't necessarily been having the year that we expected him to have at center, Devontae Wyatt, Micah, one of those losses by itself, you can probably overcome. All of them compounding, again and again and again. Jordan Love getting concussed and having to leave a game that the Packers looked very much in control of, like Zach Tom even being out for a couple weeks, Evan Williams being out a couple weeks, getting Christian Watson back late in the season, Jaden Reed, like there were so many things that had to happen for the season to go the way that it is. And I'm certainly not trying to be doom and gloom about it, right? Like, I'll be an optimist. I enjoy watching the Packers play football. It can be terrible football, and I will still watch it, until the final whistle. Week 18, I'm not expecting anything from. If it's like Max Brosmer and Clayton Tune, we're still going to tune in and watch it. But yeah, I think that finally, the wind is out of the sails a little bit. And for as much as this team can compete with anybody in the postseason, the hill that they're going to have to climb to make it a you know, a a good matchup is unfortunately getting a little bit steeper.
Yeah, I think 4 weeks ago, realistically, a lot of us had Super Bowl aspirations, and I don't think that is a, a common perception around the fan base, or certainly not the national media. But I think this is still a team that has some really good playmakers. If you get a healthy Lev, he can get back on a heater. These receivers start to look like this is really going to be a good unit. Watson looks like a dominant one. And then you're getting some plays. Matthew Golden, I thought he actually could have had a little bit more tonight. Dobbs had some really nice plays. Wicks had a one catch, but it was like it's nice to see them getting involved in the passing game. I think if you can get that run game going again with Tom returning, like the offense can scare other teams. So
Let's end there because that's where I was gonna ask you, and you kind of started already. So for anybody that's still listening, 27 minutes into the episode, I promised is going to be really short. One reason for optimism for this Packers team, not necessarily in Week 18, but just going into the postseason.
Yeah, I think that's it. It's for me, it's Jordan Love. Like I think this guy is ready to take a step to being a truly elite quarterback in this league. And if he's going to do that, he's going to have to put the team on his shoulders in the playoffs, and really like lead this team to the promised land. Now, maybe they don't get all the way there, but for me, looking at what could potentially be a really great 2026 starts right now. So yeah, hey, let's win the Super Bowl. That's great. But if you're going to fall short of that, I want to see this team really start to develop an identity on going, being led by number 10's right arm.
Yeah, and I mean, I think that this Ravens game is certainly gonna skew statistics, right? You put up or you give up 41 points, and that's gonna kind of just alter the rest of your numbers for the remainder of the regular season when you're looking at the picture. But you know, Browns game, loss was a field goal. Panthers game that we were there for, loss was a field goal. Eagles game, field goal. And then you go to Denver and you lose. Still one score, but it's 8 points. And then you take it to the Bears and you tie and you go into overtime and you lose by a touchdown. So to just see them kind of swing back the other way on this one, right? Like your losses are getting worse, and you could argue that everything else got worse along with those losses, but I think just stopping the bleeding, as much as, that feels weird to say in a game that is quote unquote meaningless for the Packers now. And like you said, just building on the good pieces. It would be really great to see the defense capitalize on some turnover opportunities. It feels like they've been progressively closer week in and week out, and they just haven't been able to snag one. So starting to stack the successes, to use an old coaching cliche, and put themselves in a position to truly win the North in 2026, because I thought it was right there in front of them this season as well. And now, unfortunately, Jordan Love's gonna have to wait another year before he gets his first T-shirt as the starter of the Packers. We know he's had them before, but thank you, Andrew. I think that's gonna do it for this one. Appreciate you joining me. Let the people know where they can find you.
Yeah, absolutely. And just to add on to what you're saying, there will be no expectations and no pressure. So they're going to be able to play really fast and loose, which I love too. Yeah, so you can find me. I hang around Blue Sky a little bit. We are on a little bit of a hiatus with the draft fellows, but we'll be doing some stuff with Pack-A-Day in the spring, I'm sure. And yeah, looking forward to talking and interacting with folks. But thanks for having me.
Yeah, of course. You can find us at PWSS Podcast or at Pax What She Said, Perry at Perry_Goldstein, me at Maggie J. Loney. We'll be back to talk about the Packers' last division game of the season in Week 18, and then do a little bit of a postseason preview. Andrew, thanks again so much. And until next time, go Pack Go.
Go Pack Go.